Yeah, I can see now.
Yep, and then let me drop this link for you guys.
Yep. I will also share quickly with Telegram, the beeps. So, Hussein, I will also share with you this like a live streaming.
Yeah, sure.
I think we have like a 6 people watching now already.
Yeah, there'll be some people
Okay.
probably.
Okay. Let's wait 1 or 2 minutes, Kinan, right?
Yep. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, everyone who's joining us. We'll get started here in a few minutes. Really honored to have Hussein from PwC joining us for this presentation. Should be very exciting. Hey, AJ. Thanks a lot for joining. And yeah, if you guys have questions throughout this, I'll be monitoring the YouTube chat. So definitely drop your questions in there, and then we can get to those towards the end.
I think it's lagging, Kinan, little bit, right?
Yeah, there's like a 30-second delay with
Okay.
YouTube.
Okay. The Don is already here as always. Welcome, Don. Okay. Good. I think we have 17 already. Let's wait 1 more minute, then we can start.
Here on, yeah, thanks a lot, guys, for joining, Don. Yeah, again, if you guys have questions throughout this, definitely drop them into the chat. Really excited to have Hussein from PwC, their blockchain lead, with this presentation. Should be really interesting, learning all the stuff that are working on. And yeah, we were just talking beforehand, right, Hussein, about the World Economic Paper, and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and so there's an example from where you're from in India, right?
Yeah, I'm also from India, and I can relate to a couple of points which is highlighted over there. And yeah, thanks again, to Kenan and Sagar for organizing this. Really excited to be here and looking forward to have a really exciting Q&A. Hopefully not too technical because I'm coming really from the strategy and business side of it. And yeah, I have prepared some agenda for today, looking blockchain from a different perspective, or I would say different classes, how management sees over here, on this topic, and what are the key burning points in the industry. So yeah, hopefully it's exciting for everyone, and then look forward to really engaging discussions.
Perfect.
Cool. Yeah, Cigar, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think we can start now. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I think this is the before end of the year, we have like a last meetup from the Chainlink. And thank you, Hussein, for joining us. So Hussein is a PwC, he's working at PwC as a blockchain Europe lead, and he's going to tell about like a future of the future of the supply chain. Yeah. And Kinan, welcome, Kinan. And Kinan is working as a like community manager at Chainlink Labs, and he's going to stay with us, and he's also going to tell us some like few words about Chainlink, and then we'll jump into the presentation from Hussein. So Kinan, please.
Cool. Yeah. Well, again, thanks guys for joining us, and gals. Really excited to have Hussein. Thank you a lot for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. I think most of you guys know about Chainlink. Just a few notes. Yeah, definitely, subscribe to this YouTube channel where we do a lot of our advocate hosted meetups here. And you'll find a lot of really cool, interesting content from some real thought leaders in this space. As well, really want to give a shout out for this entire year, all the advocates of the Chainlink and the entire Chainlink community. Everyone has been able to do a whole lot of meetups and get some really interesting speakers, and I hope helps you guys learn more about this space and more about Chainlink, and helps you kind of grow personally. So yeah, really want to thank you guys. It's been a fun year and really excited for 2021. We were talking earlier too, so we released a new white paper with the World Economic Forum. I'll drop those links into the chat, but definitely give that a read over the weekend. Otherwise, yeah, Hussein, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks, Keenan and Sagar. Let me share my screen now. Please let me know once you see my screen. Oops, sorry.
Yep.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes, now we can see the full screen.
Yep, look good.
Perfect.
Great. Then, first of all, thanks to you guys, and I think Chainlink, especially, organizing this, I think it's pretty exciting, and especially the area of focus, what you are trying to achieve, I think it quite fits well in the supply chain, because I think there are a number of, external factors affecting the supply chain, and a lot of inputs, like weathers and all of the things which we need, to really have the transparency in the supply chain, which I will touch upon a little bit today. And I think that makes totally sense, what you guys are doing, and I think it's a great job, developing this middle layer, what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, looking forward, to also in future, somehow working together, or probably, a lot of thought leadership doing together. Yeah. So let me get into the topic now. So welcome, and from my side, first of all, let me introduce quickly myself. We are going to talk about, how blockchain will underpin the future of digital supply chains. I think I'm pretty sure you might have heard a lot about, different from different sources and in conferences about this topic, but I have tried to bring here, very exciting agenda today, and look in a different perspective, from a management perspective, what are the key challenges, what are the key use cases, how we develop those use cases, and so on. So hopefully it's exciting and interesting for you guys. So before I jump into the topic, let me introduce myself. So I'm based in Munich, originally coming from India, so west part of the India, and near Mumbai. And yeah, I'm since a long time, I would say, in consulting now, and my background is also from digital transformation and blockchain. So meaning, driving the complete digital transformation programs at our clients. And basically I'm a electrical engineer, so it fits quite well, what I'm doing, and pretty exciting. So I have been working, on the IoT topics before, also on topics like predictive maintenance, digital twins of the systems, and that's how I ended up, with the blockchain topic in terms of trust and security. And I have been doing this, blockchain topic specifically on the supply chain now since more than 3 years. And yeah, it has been a great time, an exciting time, I would say. I have got a chance to work on a various projects across the globe. In the last year itself, I worked across 10 countries, I would say, specifically on this topic, working with clients from multiple industries. And I think I can't, say enough, how exciting this is to understand various challenges, how this technology can solve. And happy to, share some of the learnings over here today. Yeah. So let me, go to the next one over here, what I'm going to talk about today. So I will start with, what's the status quo, where are we when we talk about blockchain and supply chain, what's happening today in the market, just to also capturing what happened this year in 2020 alone, what are the companies driving this topic. Next one is, I have brought a very specific use case from pharma industry, because I think why blockchain, I don't want to bore with you any definition over here, but really bring practical example that why really we need blockchain in supply chain. And I have, with the case study, what I'm targeting is to really have that detailed understanding that why are we using blockchain, and what exactly blockchain is solving in the overall picture of supply chain. Next is also regarding the case studies or use cases, I would say. And this is again, I think many of you who are involved in this topic have seen a lot of, use cases already in the market. But as you know, there is no solution that fits all. And this is what I have also brought here, that how you actually shape those use cases, specific to industry, specific to a client, specific to that particular case study. So this will really help you to understand that what needs to be considered, what are the key success factors for defining those use cases. And last but not the least, what are the key takeaways? What's next, right, in this topic? So I think nowadays it's a lot of information already available in the internet, where you find everything. But it's important to understand what's coming up next, to really understand, where we stand, and then also chase and this technology along with the development happening, along with the convergence of other technologies. Great. So I will directly start with the first topic over here. Where are we today? So recently we launched our report, our global report, Time for Trust, where we really analyzed what is the impact this technology having on a global economy. All right, and we really analyzed the impact across various countries, various continents over here, and as you see on the screen, there is a huge impact being developed by blockchain by 2030 of around 1.7 trillion US dollars. And I think there are multiple reports out there, highlighting different numbers over here. But just to highlight what numbers here state is really highlighting that what is the value add, by this technology to the economy. Meaning, what are the products and services will be used by the businesses in the next 10 years that will really boost the economy. And that is the numbers what here reflects on the screen. And you see it's a tremendous impact. And as you see the acceleration of the impact comes after 2025. And I think why 2025? Because I would say, there is a specific adoption pattern in the industry. And, I think if you compare the adoption patterns of internet and the blockchain, you can realize that, there is some pattern and there is some adoption time which the technology needs. And, by 2025, there won't be a question like, do we need a blockchain? Is this a relevant technology for us? And I think, at the moment we get this type of question because nobody understands that blockchain is really underlying technology. It's not a technological approach like IoT or AI, but it's like a HTTP of internet, which stays behind your IT infrastructure when we talk about the decentral networks. And that is what, you will see after 2023, I would say that this would be the inherent part of the whole future IT architectures. And that's how you see a tremendous impact, going 2025 and above, that there is a huge impact down the line. But we don't only analyze impact on the economies, we also analyzed according to the case studies or use cases. You see various on the graph over here, but the most I want to highlight over here is the provenance, right? So track and trace, or whatever you say it over here, that is relating to supply chain. So supply chain is one of the biggest applications around blockchain, having the majority of the impact over here, and approximately around $1 trillion in 10 years. So I think where this money is coming from, or where this economic value is coming, is from various applications like anti-counterfeit applications, food fraud, medicine fraud, all those applications where these technologies are planned to being implemented, and that's where this value is being coming from. Now we talked about what is the impact of this technology, but let's see also of the reports we always follow, right? I have also brought over here what does the Gartner cycle says over here. And when you look also here, the Gartner hype cycle, you see blockchain is already, coming almost out of the trough of disillusionment and, moving towards the plateau of productivity. And also the timeline, which is highlighted, is also within 2 to 5 years. That again, reflects back to this adoption pattern, which I just mentioned before. And, this is not anything written on stone. There are different, factors like industry adoption, regulation, which can really affect the adoption. And I think most of you have heard, the COVID-19 especially has really impacted the adoption rate of digital technologies, right? And I think this has also really affected blockchain platforms, because there have been a lot of fraud cases this year in terms of, mask and other PPE equipments and so on. So I think this technology has definitely, gained some acceleration this year. And I think in the next 2 to 3 years would be the key point of this technology, developing along with some other technologies. But let's not only be talking about facts. Let's see what really happened this year. And I can clearly say, that 2020 was the year of blockchain and supply chain. This is what you see on the screen is really an excerpt of, a few headlines I have brought over here. But, we had so many headlines every month, which we can actually track. And all those are very exciting. But I tried to bring, from different aspects, from different industries over here, So I think Amazon, I think, really challenged or brought a new platform, where they are really tracking for the used items, so that you can, whenever you buy, you can see, okay, where this is coming from. You can actually identify the identities behind it and so on. So that is one of the biggest news, going towards the mainstream adoption. Walmart, I would also like to highlight, they have been doing a lot of activities, testing various platforms, and they are really the front runners, I would say, in the F&B space, testing various platforms, various technologies, and also different functions of supply chain. So here you see, they are testing really the freight side or the logistics side of the supply chain, but there are cases where they are really focusing on track and trace and some other use cases. And these are really the examples, where you see the mainstream adoption over here. Then also I would like to highlight, a couple of, investments, or I would say the partnership happening, across the automotive sector with Porsche and Circularize, where they are focusing on the circular economy or circular supply chain side of it, tracking plastics, tracking battery materials. Also, next one is from MasterCard, so the interesting is we always see MasterCard as the finance company or the payment company behind it, but this time they are really getting into the supply chain area and really enabling the provenance of some of the, food supply chains in North America. Then going further, we also have some great news from the GS1, when it comes to standardization. So they really talk about developing the guidelines to help companies implement this on a full scale, right? Or what about the data standards, interoperability, how we develop the standard across the continents, across the industry, and so on. Then we really talked also about the provenance, and the data standard. Then, I think the interesting one is Mitsubishi, I think, which talks about really the P2P platform. So they really started a blockchain platform for metal trading, right? And then so on and so on. So I think there are more some for the luxury fashion and so on. So I think this is only some of them, as I mentioned, but there has been a lot of things happening in this space. And I think every month there are so many, companies starting new pilots and production projects. And yeah, I think it can't be, more exciting time than this. And I think I really, this activities can be seen that it will still grow further in the next year. Going to next, covering, what PwC is doing. So I think PwC is also an active driver of this topic, right? We have been involved, for example, in the F&B space, also during the COVID-19, we developed some of the immunity passport, right? Also tracking, also the identity of the persons, flying from one country to another using a blockchain platform, right? We also have some great partnership in luxury fashions and also aerospace area and so on. And we are also actively doing a lot of thought leadership, right? So we have published a lot of nice white papers this year. You can actually scan the QR codes and directly have a link, for the reading over here. So I think, as you see, we really launched a lot of papers, for example, in automotive, in logistics or global impact. And there are a few in a pipeline, covering supply chain topic as well. Okay, going on to the next one. So, we spoke a lot about what's happening, what's the status, but let's see, what's the status across industries, right? So this really gives you an overview, where does various industries stand today in blockchain implementation, right? So I think, as I mentioned, F&B and the consumer goods industry are really leading in this space. They are really testing, in multiple aspects, this kind of technology, from public blockchain and private blockchain and so on. Followed by that, I would say also pharma industry. I think pharma and healthcare is a very interesting space, where a lot of things are happening across, various functions or business aspects of pharma industry, like clinical trials, tracing of medicines, also how we can use the data, collecting the data itself for a lot of insights and cancer research and so on. So I think this can't get more interesting, exciting in this space also. Also, luxury fashion, I think a lot of things happening. For example, here in France, a lot of companies are really championing on this to really prove that the product which they are selling is really the authenticated one, and developing really end-to-end supply chain, visibility to their customer, so to ensure that whatever costly product or the luxury item they're buying is really authentic. And as you see, there are many other industries, across this graph, which is quite interesting and moving towards the adoption over here. But we always talked about the good things about the blockchain, but also we need to consider what are really the blocks, which we need to really tackle going further, going towards this adoption pattern, which we discuss. So I think one of the biggest challenge which we see is really the understanding of this technology, because I have seen, across the globe, people coming from different backgrounds have a different understanding of this technology, as well as, when we talk with the companies, they have really, they're really focus of their business area, but they don't have the complete picture that how it will really affect the complete supply chain. And I would say sometimes it's really a lack of awareness of this topic, right? So I think this is really one of the biggest challenge which is coming, and which is being solved quite quickly with a lot of, mainstream media, which is getting covered on the blockchain topic nowadays. As well as, now the second one, which I would like to also highlight, that, most of the company are really, concerned about data sharing. When we talk about data sharing, it's about partnering with their sub competitors, partnering with some of the suppliers, sharing data openly on this platform, because blockchain only makes sense when there are multiple parties participating. So if it's only two companies, you can probably do with another solution out there in the market. You really don't need a blockchain. It only makes sense when you really don't, when you're working with a party which is untrusted, which you don't know, basically. And this is where, again, the question of data sharing and working together comes over here, and it is one of the biggest challenge. And then there are multiple, right? So how we work with the existing legacy technologies, right? So here we are not talking about changing some technologies over here, but really, this is a complementary technology, which will actually sit on top of existing infrastructure like SAP or, any other ERP systems. And last but not the least, I think really sometimes the focus is completely wrong. So I think when we talk about use cases, I think they really have some narrow focus without understanding what is the real value out of blockchain. Because sometimes, there are use cases where you can really think, okay, you don't need a blockchain for that, and those are the same guys who says, okay, blockchain doesn't add any value to this kind of platform. But the real challenge is, they don't really understand what is the real application of blockchain. So I think these are some of really the challenge, going further. But I'm pretty sure, I think a lot of institutions, academies, and other companies are really working, to solve these problems in the upcoming time. Now, let me, I think we spoke about what's the status today. I think we had a look on in terms of, the impact. We had a look on what are the activities from our side, and also, what is really the status of various industries in the market right now. Let's look, why we really need blockchain in supply chain, and specifically why blockchain is basically a game changer in supply chain. So, let me directly come with some of the news, which is really, in the recent time and quite close to all of us. As you see here, there are a number of things happening as we speak. So I think there are already a lot of threat, for the duplicate COVID vaccines, right? And for example, horse meat and the beef road, I think that is ongoing since years, I would say. And also a lot of counterfeit of, some of the items like, cartridges of printers and so on. So I think there are and these are just to name a few. There are many products, which are being counterfeited. There is a lot of fraud happening in the market. And just taking this example, can't the existing system solve this, right? There are many smart solutions out there in the market, right? With AI based, ML based, there are many very smart cloud solution out there. Why can't we use those solutions or systems just to solve this problem, just to have the transparency across the supply chain? The reason is, the following. I think there are software solutions out there in the market which can solve and bring really the transparency. But what is the problem is, you see on the first point itself, it's really a complex technology landscape. So you have subsystems, but you need to integrate with 100 more systems just to receive this end-to-end transparency, right? And that makes really complex technology landscape. And who invest in this kind of in this kind of developing this kind of a technology landscape in times of really decreasing profit margin in the global trade, and that is one of the biggest challenge. That's why we don't see this transparency which needs to be there normally in this kind of supply chain, and that leads to these gaps which leads to ultimately fraud and under counterfeit products. The second point I would like to highlight over here is that normally, we talk with the big players, big supermarkets or the big OEMs. We always say, okay, we can develop some kind of cloud solution, which can really enable this transparency. Yes, indeed, they can help, but how many players we can include in this? Maybe a couple of suppliers down the line, but we can't involve, all the small suppliers, stakeholders, in the supply chain. And that's where, the blockchain really adds value, because I think when we talk about adding those small players in the supply chain, there is a problem of cyber threat, because then you don't have any control what's happening with your data and who is accessing that. So I think that is another challenge, which is really faced to receive this end-to-end supply chain transparency. And the next is, I mentioned before, data sharing and ownership. I think this is one of the biggest problem, in all the industry, that nobody wants to share their data, because, and data, I mean, it's not about, where the product is going, but ultimately we are managing a lot of, confidential data, but like commercial contracts, where the products are and so on, and how to manage this. Because I think initially, they were really using the cloud-based contracts or cloud-based solution. But for example, PDFs can be easily manipulated or changed. And there were some cases, where there was duplicate invoices, duplicate entries of the same items, where, it stopped really the adoption of those kind of platform. And this is exactly where, the blockchain solution comes into play. That blockchain is not a kind of a technology replacing it. It's basically a complementary technology adding and sitting on top of the existing infrastructure, bringing all the points what you see on the right over here, right? So it really brings to transparency, by connecting all those existing system, right? You are able to achieve the single source of truth across the supply chain. The second point, I think, which you mentioned, right, including the second small supply chain stakeholders, I think using blockchain, you can actually ensure the security and immutability of the data which is being incorporated into the platform. So in a way, not only it is about the data, but you can actually encrypt the data as well as the relevant information for each of the stakeholders participating. So it's not like all the information is being shared by all the parties, but you can actually encrypt according to the participation and the role of the supply chain stakeholders, in the supply chain. And last but not the least, which is one of the key pillars of the blockchain technology, that it really brings trust. So you are assured that nobody can tamper the data, right? And no single party can modify the data. And that is what really the value add of blockchain. And I think that is where, really it strengthens the adoption and the case for blockchain. Now, enough of being said, let's see a specific example, and a case study from a pharma industry. So, I have heard, multiple times from various companies that said, yeah, okay, we really don't understand what is the use case of blockchain or what is the value add of blockchain, when it comes about traceability, when it comes about, different other use cases. We can do it with some of the existing systems, and so on. But as I mentioned before, the real problem is sometimes, we don't have the correct understanding that where do we need to use blockchain. And also important is, blockchain is not a silver bullet. It doesn't solve all your problems, and it's not one-stop solution for everything. Definitely we need to think about convergence, right? Meaning, how it has a play along with different technologies which is being developed at the moment, like IoT, right? Like AI, like ML, and so on. And without that understanding, we won't come further. And I think most of the time we have seen in the companies that they are really having a blockchain team and they are really driving the blockchain programs, which sometimes lacks, how the other technologies can accelerate and emphasize the activities what they are doing it. And I think let me highlight over here with a specific case study of how we can actually track medicine end to end, from manufacturer to the consumer. So I think you can actually consider an example if you're going to a kind of a pharmacy and buying a specific medicine, right? So I think I'm bringing here the perspective from each of the players. I won't go in all the players detail, but let me speak about the manufacturer and the consumer today here. So for example, in manufacturer process, right, in terms of, what are the key challenges that manufacturer is facing in terms of medicine counterfeiting? So, when we look at the traditional processes, they really don't have the full traceability. So they are not able to track the medicine throughout the life cycle or throughout the supply chain, right? they are not really able to have this transparency of chargebacks. What are chargebacks is basically whenever the medicine is not used and being sent by the retailer to a manufacturer, that is what we call, or in their language, a chargeback, right? So they need to pay back again to the retailers or the consumer if the medicine is not used. Then last but not the least, they are heavily dependent on the broker, because I think the items like medicine, plants, food, they are heavily controlled on various ports before entering the countries, and you need to really go through a specific custom processes, and you need to provide a lot of documents, and all those being are handled by certain brokers. We call it as a freight forwarders also in the supply chain language, and the companies are heavily dependent on them. They really need to comply with all the documents and all those things which need to follow, and they really don't have any upper hand on this. They need to just follow the guidelines from their side. So these are the really challenges over there. So when we look at a first step of IoT, right? So what IoT can do, and I think in our blockchain space language, what are the oracles we need, right, to connect? So I think in terms of IoT, right, I think tracking the medicine is achievable. I think it's partially shown, in meaning we are able to achieve, like how we are getting at the moment from DHL, that we are actually receiving the track and trace at certain points in the supply chain, that where it is, and you have some idea that, okay, when it will reach to you, that we are getting at the IoT. And then what we are not getting is this transparency in the chargeback. It really doesn't involve this financial process or the financial flow of the products, as well as, the dependence on the broker, that is more or less the information flow. You are not getting that information flow of the items or medicine over here. But then when you add on top of the IoT layer or blockchain layer, right, what happens is you are really incorporating those small players, which we just talked about, and you have the full transparency. So you're able to have a full end-to-end transparency across the supply chain. And that is where the real value out of blockchain. So because sometimes people say, yeah, okay, with the IoT, we can get the real track and trace. But can you really enable the truck companies which is transporting in Asia based in Europe? No, you can't do it, right? And this is where the real value comes from. So you really know, okay, which truck is taking your medicine to retailer in India or in China or whatever, even though you are based in Europe or America or whatever place, right? The instant chargeback, I think using smart contracts, you can actually say, okay, if somebody sends back and scans those QR code, and once it's being scanned, you can actually immediately execute the chargeback process via smart contract. And with the possibility of this, peer-to-peer mechanism on blockchain, you can actually directly communicate with the customs, removing all the requirement of the intermediate parties. So this is how, you can define the use case for the manufacturers in this supply chain. And if you look into this one, you can actually go and say, okay, in terms of distributor, what are the problems, right? So they really if the medicine is damaged, they need to claim that, and for example, they don't have any product verification system. So this is where blockchain can really help. And for example, for the retailer, right, so that is basically where we buy the medicines. What are their problems? So they really don't know is the medicine what they're selling is the original one, right? So it's a lot of things happening in the market. And at the moment, the drug counterfeit is a 200 billion market today, and it's a huge market, I would say, and a huge problem, I would say, not a market which needs to be solved. Actually, they don't have really a real-time tracking of the medicine which is coming to them. They don't have like a chargeback refund, right? So they have already paid for a specific amount, and now they are not getting immediately paid back, for the medicine which they are sending back to the manufacturer. And across, IoT, you can still have the partial visibility of the counterfeit products or drugs, but you're not getting it 100%, right? And using blockchain, you can actually see and verify the complete provenance of your medicines. You can also have the real-time tracking where you integrate all your logistics providers, you have 100% shipment visibility over there. And simultaneously, you can also, directly using smart contract execute your chargebacks. So you are paid at the same point of time when you're sending the product back. So this really, normally this chargeback process has a credit cycle of 2 months. You're really doing it instantaneously. So you can imagine the efficiency and productivity you're bringing into the supply chain over here. And we are not really talking about the numbers. If we are talking with the big retailers, it would be in millions and sometimes also in billions. So I think this is just a few bullet points, but in reality, it's really a complex cycles of returns and so on, which is really being sold by blockchain over here. And last but not the least, in the consumer market, right? So in the consumer space, I would say, a lot of times we don't know whether the medicine we are buying is really authentic, but most of the time you don't care, right? So I think what is more interesting is, for example, if you have some problem, if you have some allergies, can you get some feedback directly from the manufacturer, right? At the moment, you don't have any platform doing that, right? You have some online chats available on the website where you can chat with a robot, but it's really not interactive and not efficient, where you can really solve those problems. And also, what are the incentives at the moment? There are a lot of offers out in the market. For example, a lot of e-commerce shops where you are buying medicines, they are offering you the discounts, but what's in for you, right? So how can we make it more lucrative in terms of marketing sales via medicine or health coupons, right? So that is more of the loyalty programs, more of the incentives which we can receive, by providing, for example, some of the informations like allergy or et cetera, et cetera. And with the IoT, you can definitely have partially the authenticity and the provenance of the medicine, but yeah, and also the instant feedback, right? You can actually now able to do that, right? So in terms of cold supply chain or whatever, you can do that, but in terms of digital tokens or in terms of coupons, you are not able to do that, right? And using blockchain, where you can actually incentivize your consumers if they provide, for example, some feedback on the medicine, if they got some allergies or something, so on. I think we would be all happy to provide those, if we are getting some, tokens in our mobile wallets, right? So I think this is where we need to be creative and thinking, okay, how we define the blockchain use cases, and this is where the real value of blockchain lies. And it's not only about track and trace and traceability of any items, but this is, if we go into still detail about each of the processes happening behind, that's where the real value is. So I think we talked, why blockchain is really the killer, so blockchain is, the killer use case for supply chain. But let's have a look, what are the main use cases in this space? And, here I have brought here what are the main applications. So these are majorly three areas how we define blockchain use cases in supply chain, right? And I think you might have seen a couple of them multiple times, but this is more of clustering those use cases, and there is no one size fit all, right? So this is not like a written on stone that this is exactly all the time it would be like that. When we do work with the client, we really start with what is the problem statement, right? And that is where it comes, the solution design of blockchain, that we really understand what is the use case we want to use, as we discussed just before, that we need to really nail it down to the point that why are we using blockchain and for what are we using blockchain. But just to go through these main big areas of supply chain, the first and foremost, I think it is one, as we discussed, having the biggest impact is the provenance one, right? Where we talk about all the track and trace of products, containers across multiple parties, across continents, and this is where it really enables, as we discussed. The next one is also the traceability of port processes, right? There are multiple processes in the port, I think, which is normally also called a black box in the supply chain, because we really don't know what's happening in the port, if the products are approved by the customs, if it's really allowed to enter into the other countries and so on. So I think this is where we can actually, really integrate blockchain to really have the transparency and information about those processes. The next one is really the provenance of some of the items, which is really critical and affecting directly to humans in terms of, in terms of any threats like food, medicine, also the luxury products and so on. So we can actually, these are all the products where we say, okay, where it is coming from, right? So the provenance of all the products. And then last but not the least, automation of the commercial processes like payments, invoice generation, custom clearance, letter of credits, and so on. So we can actually automatize all these mundane processes using smart contract. All right. So I think this is the first block or first pillar what we see under supply chain. The next one is basically, identity management. So now again, identity management is very famous use case under blockchain, but this is again with the glass of supply chain, right? So what we mean by here is developing the identity platform, right? So we are normally in the supply chain area, we are using a lot of platforms like SAP Ariba, for procurement of some items and also integrating the suppliers. But what is still missing is, whatever supplier are there, can you 100% authenticate those suppliers? Can it be trusted? If you're adding some suppliers from different continent, if they're offering cheaper price, can you trust them? And that is where you can do the KYC using blockchain, that you can also see whether they are authentic and so on. Then you can also review the financials and the certifications they have received in their own country and so on. And then in the same area we can also include a lot of certification topic and also the licensing, right? It also relates and talks about a lot of food certification, for example, medicine certification, also the plant certification, what we are talking about, right? So this is all coming under this block of use cases. And also last but not the least, in terms of documents which flow around the product, like bill of lading, another some other documents which needs to be sent with the products. I think we can all cover nicely under this pillar. And last but not the least, which is I think a very interesting one, is all the peer-to-peer platforms, right? So here again, having the supply chain lens, what is interesting is having a logistics marketplace, I would say, where you can actually see what is the free capacity on the ship which is going from A to B, and you can actually have a cheaper price, sending it on the last moment, so reserving that slot. And I think this is where the real value to the company is, that they can actually save some money in their emergency shipments by receiving a cheaper slot than compared to the normal prices. And I think this is where really the P2P platform works, right? So I think this is one example of the logistics marketplace. Another one is also for the purchasing marketplace, right? So for example, if you want to buy a kind of a headlight of your car, you normally go to a workshop at the moment, you say, okay, I need this specific headlight. They procure it from their suppliers. If you are using a BMW, they ask the BMW, and then they ask their suppliers to buy that light. But what if you just go to your app and say, okay, my headlight is broken, and you can actually directly buy it from the Bosch, who is your supplier at this point of time. And then you just receive the message that it would be delivered to you in your workshop in the next couple of days. So I think you can, these are the kind of applications which will come along, in the upcoming times. And this also relates to the different spare parts, right? So, and also, one of the major application is peer-to-peer financing platform. I think one of the biggest, role of blockchain would be in the trade finance, that all automatizing the commercial clearance, payments to importers, exporters, to banks of various parties. I think that is a very critical process in the supply chain, and also time consuming one. And just for example, the container cannot go out of the port before the commercial clearance, right? Meaning the port has to pay, or some of the entity has to pay to a bank some money of the shipment before it goes out, right? And they really don't allow to send that container out of the port. So I think if you automatize this, that once the container reaches the port, it is automatically paid. You save a lot of time, you save a lot of manual processes, and ultimately you save a lot of money. So I think this is where, for example, real value add coming in. But as I mentioned, there is no one solution fitting all, so these are just a high level use case or very prevalent use cases with most of the companies over here. But I think what is important is to understand what are the key success factors, right? When we are talking about defining these blockchain use cases. And I think this is very important to understand, right? So I think we always talk about the use case definitions for blockchain, that is this a blockchain use case, right? So we always have a lot of information on that, whether there are multiple parties, right? Whether it is demanding that it has to be timely updated, it requires time stamping, right? Those are really the blockchain technology specific checks. But we never talk about the business check, right? Whether it really makes business sense. And that's where whenever we are defining this blockchain use case, I think first and the foremost point, we need to understand what is the customer problem we are trying to solve. The customer is king, and we need to really understand this, that this is, if we say, okay, we have some inefficient processes and we want to solve this, blockchain is really not the right solution for that. And I think that is where most of the myth coming in the market, that we don't understand what is the value add, we don't understand the value of blockchain and so on, because I think this perspective, what you see on the screen, is really missing. So, first and the foremost, as you see, is really understanding the customer pain points. Then the second thing which we need to really understand is your business ready for that? If you have really bad processes, if you don't have kind of a structured processes, implementing blockchain won't help, right? And that's why the next step is really understanding how ready is your organization, implementing this kind of technology, right? The next step is, if your organization is ready, but is customer willing to pay for this or engage in this kind of platform? For example, if we are, as I mentioned before, if we are developing an app or any platform to track any bio products or any medicine, do we care really? And if we care, then are we willing to pay more? I think these are really the questions, which we need to really answer before defining that as a use case and we developing the solution design for these platforms. The next thing is, also the ecosystem acceptance. Like, even if the first three make sense, are your supply chain partners, willing to participate on this platform, right? Are they willing to share the information which you require? And what are the incentives, for them to participate? Because there are already hundreds of systems out there which they are managing the data. And if you say, okay, you want to have one more platform, what would be the reaction, right? And why they will participate? So these are also one of the key points which we need to consider, during the design of this kind of use cases. And then last but not the least, it can't be for, everything. We need to be very specific. What product are we going to track? What product or service are we talking about? Or what specific market or business are we talking about? If these 5 points are clear, I'm pretty sure, any company can make a strong business case out of it and then can really see, the real value of blockchain, going further. So I will take a pause, just to digest a lot of information, I would say, and then again, go back to the next point.
So, Hussein, shall we take one?
Yeah, so let me, I understand, we have some time for the Q&A now, also last 10 minutes, but I think I only have, one more points, what are the key takeaways, and I think I'm good to go for the Q&A session then. So I think we really spoke about, what's the status quo, why we need blockchain, and also we understand some of the case studies which is really happening in today, as we speak, and then also how we define and develop the use cases, right? And then, what's next? I think that is really interesting part. I would say, since we are closing this year, which was, I would say, really a crazy year, and I would say there was no slowing down of this topic in the industry. I think we have been discussing this multiple industry across, different continents, but most of the companies had the feedback that they have the budget intact for this kind of innovation projects. So I think 2021 is going to be pretty interesting year, I would say, still for the technology. But let's see, what are the top predictions for 2021, right? So what's coming up next? And, just to understand, supply chain in blockchain is going to be the killer use case, as we saw, so I think among all the other use cases, it's still going to be, the front runner. And you will see a lot of projects, going towards, pilot and production environments, so the projects are coming out of the lab environments or the POC environments. And I think some of the reports I just saw this month, and they have the prediction that 30% of the global projects are going towards the production. And I think that's a big number, I would say, towards the realization and some of the forecasts we have done before. The next prediction is also, related to the convergence of the topic, right? So as I mentioned before, it's not a silver bullet that it will solve. And I think also one of the missing points in most of the company when they are driving really a blockchain program is also the integration with other technologies. And I think we will see this next year, that most of the companies now are thinking that, okay, how we can combine IoT, AI, blockchain analytics, and RPA and all other emerging techs, and develop a kind of a digital platform for the company altogether. So the convergence topic is going to be really exciting for next year. The next one I think would be interoperability, right? Because if we just develop a blockchain platform or a blockchain ecosystem, it would be another cloud or island solution, I would say, for a company, right? So I think the front runners of the digital champions have understood this, and they are really going into the topic of interoperability with other blockchain platforms, as well as with the existing technologies like cloud and ERP and so on. And the next one is also very, very relevant and very interesting. And I think most of the company have been challenging. They are doing some of the, whenever we speak with the company who are really doing a pilot or a production projects, they say, yeah, okay, we have been very successful. We have developed the APIs. We have connected to the SAP or ERP systems, and we are really doing good. But then the biggest question, they say, okay, we don't know how to scale it, to the country level or to the global level. We don't have kind of a revenue model or business model for that. And exactly now, I think that would be the focus for the next year, that they will think, okay, how can we monetize this platform? Who earns how much? How we also incentivize the supply chain stakeholders, how we incentivize the consumer, the end consumers, and what is the go-to market, like where do we start? So I think this would be the topic which will get instigated next year, and then it will build upon in the next upcoming years, I would say, by 2023. And last but not the least, and I think the most important question when we are designing this kind of solution is blockchain and supply chain governance. And why I again wrote this point is, most of the time we talk about blockchain governance, meaning how we design blockchain platform, how we design node and all those topics, but we forget about the supply chain governance, right? That how we manage all the supply chain stakeholders, who is kind of the driver of the supply chain, who will own the node, right? So also along with data ownership topics, regulations, a lot of other commercial contract topics. There is a lot of legal regulatory compliance topic which comes along with this platform, which is not spoken at the moment because of the maturity at the moment. But I think this is where, next year is the time, where this all topics will start. But then, we spoke again about the blockchain predictions. But when we are talking about supply chain, we need to also understand what are the blockchain supply chain trends, which will drive the adoption of blockchain. And you will see, that some of the trends, which is coming, is really the customer is demanding for transparency. So when you are buying a bio product, you say, okay, why I'm paying more? I need to see whether I'm buying the original product or not, right? So I think we have done at PwC multiple surveys, where the customers are ready to pay higher if they are, guaranteed that this is coming from authentic source, and this is coming, for be it a luxury fashion, be it a food, automotive parts or anything, this is relevant for multiple industries over here. Circular supply chain, right? I think when we talk about car batteries for the electric cars, right? When you talk about plastics, right, which we're using in food products and so on. So I think circular supply chain has been a key topic, since last 2 years, where key focus is really reducing the waste, in terms of plastic or some of the core materials which are being used in the batteries of the cars and so on. And more or less, the goal of that supply chain is, recycling some of the material. The next one is sustainable supply chains, right? Where the focus is really on going green, right? That how we can really reduce the CO2 emissions, for example, how we can really recycle some of the material and so on. And the next one is agile supply chain. I think this is, where we can say also the same day deliveries, right? So I think there are a lot of disruptions and events happening across the supply chain, but how can we make this agile, right? And we can only make a supply chain agile when we have really a connected supply chain. And when we talk about connectivity, and I think blockchain plays an important role over there. So that's why, it will be a key driver for that. And last but not the least, it's a long shot when we talk about 2030 or beyond, right? So, a lot of small size companies are really, focusing on supply chain as a service, right? Like how we have at the moment, one click in the Amazon. And a lot of small and medium sized companies are trying to outsource a lot of, part of the supply chain, which can be outsourced to different, logistics company, for example, or, inventory management companies and so on. And I think there we really need a trust. All right, and I think trust will play a major role over there, and I think that's why that topic will also drive the supply chain adoption over there. So with that, I would like to, conclude my presentation over here. And I hope, this brings and give you some inspiration on the topic itself, and also brings you some perspective from the business side. Once again, thank you everyone for your time and your patience.
Okay, thank you, Hussein. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and I think we will go forward to the Q&A session. And I think some of our audience have already asked some questions, which is like from Jaron Hasp. He asked like, which blockchains do you see most adopted for supply chain purposes, and how do we fix interoperability issues if every company or country uses their own blockchain?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question again, and there is no right or wrong answer to this. So we see, different approaches using private and public blockchain. So most of the time, uh, companies or industries, coming in, for example, in trade finance, they are tending towards, public blockchains. But when the companies, or the drivers of the supply chain, for example, one specific industry I can name in food or pharma, they are really tending towards using the private blockchains, right? Because they are really the drivers of the supply chain, and they can actually enforce all the suppliers to, follow certain, methodology or certain way to track the products. So, overall, still, it depends on which industry we are talking about. But, in consumer market industry, we still see, a lot of adoption in the private blockchain side. And to answer your second part of the question in terms of interoperability, right? I think this is, I would say, as I mentioned, this is a topic which is really upcoming now. People are thinking now, that how we can make it interoperable, because they are starting to realize that if the suppliers are using a different blockchain, they really can't do anything apart from interoperability. So I think that topic is really coming. And I think we have some great solutions like Polkadot and Cosmos, who are trying to solve this, topic in the market. But in terms of adoption, I think most of the front runners are aware of the solution. But in terms of adoption, I think it will be there in the upcoming 2 or 3 years.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I think the second question comes from Javier Smith Patterson. He asked like, how can we start implementing or prototyping these approaches? I am a software engineer focused on front end and learning Solidity now. Maybe a prototype we can build?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, most of the time when we go to the client, most of the time they are the drivers of the supply chain. And, where we start this kind of project is really defining, what business problem are we trying to solve? Because I think that is the correct way to start this kind of project. So from business problem, we convert that business problem to an opportunity, meaning what is the use case? So that's what we discussed today. That's why I brought the topic in the agenda, that you carve out that use case, how you will be using the blockchain for that. And based on that blockchain, use case, you develop a POC. So you test really the idea what you have developed, whether it makes business sense, because you can't just go to any other supply chain stakeholder or any other consumer and say, okay, let's build this platform, without showing them and convincing them. And for convincing them and bringing on board, you need that kind of POC or a pilot project where you can demonstrate really the business value as well as the technical value, to the supply chain ecosystem players. Yeah. So yeah, you should definitely start with a POC, but before starting a POC, you need to really define the business value and the use case. Yeah.
Okay, the last question comes from my side as we talk about, and the topic main header was like time to trust. So let me ask you one question regarding like a Chainlink. So Chainlink is providing like a decentralized oracle. So where do you see the like a future of decentralized oracles in terms of supply chain? Because we need to like blockchain need to connect and talk with off chain. And then Chainlink is providing the decentralized like oracles, and there's like a data is coming from like any third party, and it's trustable. So where do you see the future of it in terms of like supply chain?
So I think there is no question about future, right? It's an indispensable, I would say, middleware which needs to be there in a tech stack, right? So when we talk about digitalizing or automatizing some commercial processes like smart contract based insurances and so on, where you say, okay, if my flight is delayed, you need to execute your smart contract automatically. But then what is your source of truth? right? So if you say, okay, if you say that your flight was delayed, but if somebody else says my flight is not delayed, so there the human input doesn't help. You really need an automated input or automated sources of information, or I would say the external information. And to collect those information, you definitely need a decentralized oracles. And I think that is where really the value of decentralized oracle comes in. And I think I have seen some of the work what you guys have been doing, and I think it both ways, right? It's not about only collecting the information, but also executing and again providing input back to the legacy systems once the information has been executed or the smart contract has been executed. So I think this is where on both the ends of the supply chain, or I would say both the ends of the blockchain, I think oracles plays an important role. But the key thing is it's not only about developing the oracle itself, but also considering how we really capture those oracle data, right? So for example, when we talk about cold supply chain in pharma industry, meaning that for example, COVID vaccine, right? It needs to be transported in minus temperature, right? So how do you collect those information? So are you using sensors? Are you using some other other RFIDs or QR codes or barcodes, right? That is where it gets very interesting, that how you actually integrate those physical devices to collect the information. So I think this is the way further, and I think this will get mature during the next couple of years. But I think
Perfect.
to conclude, it is very relevant, and I think it is one of the key component of the technology landscape. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hussein, for joining us today. And before closing this event, I would like to thank you, Disrupt Network, who is like a community provider for us and who did like marketing for us. And I would also like to thank beincrypto.com for giving a press release of our event. And thank you, audience, to joining us. And hopefully see you soon for the next event of Chainlink. Yeah. Thank you, Hussein.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
nice evening. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
Bye bye.